Subscribe to The Honest Critique for current affairs, movie, book, and product reviews. Also, make sure you press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the video series are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent those of The Honest Critique and its employees. The following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion advised.
So, hello and welcome to a very special episode we are recording today. I'm joined by Matthew Gill, who is the CEO of AI Venture Labs, AION Labs, and a leading voice in the Israeli high tech and biotech community. So, thank you so much, Matthew, for taking your time and speaking to us.
Thank you.
So, two of the things that have impacted the Israeli business sector, as I was reading in your article, was the second Intifada and the recent COVID-19 pandemic. So before I go into how the war, the current October 7 massacre and the war that led to that impacted the industry, could you just talk a little bit about those two effects, actually, the second Intifada and the COVID-19 pandemic did have an impact on the Israeli high-tech industry?
Yeah, sure. So maybe it's just better to speak in a broader element and a more macro element is that the Israeli high-tech industry, which has been around for about 30 to 40 years, has always been very resilient in face of any type of threat, external threat. Now, those external threats could come from lack of security and stability in Israel. So there you're talking about the second Intifada, the war in Lebanon, and all the different cycles we've been in since. And of course, COVID as an external threat, not unique to Israel, but as an external threat. And also as far as global economic threats. So you're talking about the high-tech bubble in the early 2000s. And then again, which Israel as a high-tech nation should have been more susceptible to, but fortunately we were very resilient in face of, as well as also the global economic crisis in 2008, 2009, with the housing crisis in the U.S. and everything that came after that. Israel, and of course COVID, Israel has always been relative to other countries, relatively very resilient and stable, and continued to grow as a high-tech sector. And while other countries and ecosystems have not been able to maintain that level of growth and stability throughout those past 25, 30 years that I just spanned. I think for the first time now, we're facing, for the last year in Israel, quite a unique threat. First from the judicial reform or overhaul, depending on how you want to look at it, that the Israeli government brought, which was directly threatening Israel as a place that's attractive for investment for foreign investors in Israel, and even for Israeli investors in Israel. But even more so since October 7th and the war, that's been another element that has been unique to Israel that we're facing at this point, while the rest of the world might be recovering from COVID and from previous crises in Israel. Now we're dealing with this. And so even if the stock market goes up in the US, it doesn't mean that the Israeli companies are necessarily going to do as well.
And, one of the most famous books, the most popular book actually in India is The Startup Nation, which talks about the Israeli high-tech industry. And for our audience, if you could tell us a little background before we start the conversation about the Israeli culture or the cultural factors that leads to this high-tech boom or becomes a hub for innovation and entrepreneurship in the tech sector.
Yeah, so Israel as a culture, we're a very diverse culture and population from multi-ethnical backgrounds and beliefs. Very diverse also on a gender basis, and diverse also from, we all kind of environment, whether it's in high tech or in the military and security systems. That diversity creates quite a strong melting pot for innovation and for ideas and outside the box thinking. And there's nothing that Israelis love more than when someone tells them they can't do something and something is impossible. And we are very good at a country, very strong as a country in in coming together at times of crisis to align on one mission that we feel is absolutely necessary to achieve. And I think in times of crisis, when our backs are against the wall, that's what brings out the best of Israel. That in times of crisis, you need everyone to work together. And you don't always need to go into it with a very long-term strategic plan in order to deal with the crisis in the initial stages. And that's something Israel's good at. We're very good at improvising, coming up with a plan on the fly. Execution, we're very good at in Israel. Those are some of the things you can read about in Startup Nation. Some of the things that we could learn better how to do, whether it's from our colleagues in India or in the United States or anywhere else, is how to bring some more of that long-term strategic thinking, because some of the things that are conducive to building a startup and building groundbreaking innovation that are so inherent with the Israeli chutzpah culture of being able to achieve things that everyone says are unachievable, are not necessarily conducive culturally to long-term thinking and strategic planning for decades down the road. And that's something that I think we're understanding in Israel that we need to develop better.
And one of the things that you've covered in the article, and it's impressive because this is something which, as Indians, we don't have it, because the relation between the military and the softwares or the technology that the military has coming and integrating into the civilian life, it's very rarely seen in India. So could you tell us a little bit about that, how the Israel's mandatory military service actually contributes to the resilience and the innovation that you see in the Israeli tech sector?
So maybe I'll just start with a different industry, and then we'll go into the military and where that is conducive to tech. So I have a personal philosophy that each one of us at some point should be a waiter or a bartender or in any type of shape or form in the service industry. Because then when we become the clients, we have much more deeper respect for those that are bringing us our coffee or our beer, drinks, and food. And we have a deep respect and a little bit more modesty and appreciation in that sense. And I think the fact that everyone in Israel serves in the military brings out a lot of good character and a lot of good culture in this community, in the fact that we all serve a purpose, and we all have to dedicate a few years of our life to that. Now, when a military, we're not the only military that has developed great tech. Other militaries have developed great and use technology at the highest level possible. We're not unique in that. What we are unique in is two things. Since everyone serves, then we're bringing into the Israeli army the most brightest technological innovators that Israel has to offer. By definition, since everyone's serving. You will not see Steve Jobs having done military service in the United States. He never did it. But the Israeli Steve Jobs all do, and all have. So that's number one. So within the military, you'll have the best and brightest that Israel has to offer, having served. Secondly, once they're finished serving, they go back into industry. So no one serves forever. Some serve for 25 years, some serve like I did for 6 years, and some serve for 2 to 3 years, and that's it. But when they're done serving, they go into industry and they contribute to society and to technology from a civilian aspect. And having already served, then they're also going to take their lessons that they've learned and their capabilities that they helped hone and developed during their military service, and their culture of service, of serving a greater good, into what they do in the high-tech industry. And I think that's something that's very unique to Israel.
And how much of the government support in terms of funding for the research and development or the tax incentive would provide for the success of the ecosystem in Israel?
Yeah, so I think the Israeli government, I could talk a lot about things that government in general and the Israeli government doesn't do right. One thing that the Israeli government absolutely does right is prioritizing the high-tech sector and allocating funds for it and taking risks on investing without taking equity, but just investing in grants, capital into industries that they want to develop to be national growth engines. So when in this, the Israeli government has been investing in science and technology in Israel and in the high-tech industry for decades, and more specifically over the past 7 years since the Israel Innovation Authority, which is an ingenious reform of the Israeli government to actually establish it as an authority independent that will go out and help promote and invest in the high-tech sector in Israel and invest in its growth. They've been doing this for the past 7 years in a very effective manner through the Israel Innovation Authority. And that is why when this crisis started on October 7th, the government was able, the Israel Innovation Authority, the IIA was able to be very agile, as Israelis are usually, in doubling down their support for the industry, not pulling back and saying, okay, we need these resources for somewhere else, but the opposite. We're going to double down. We're going to increase our budget to invest in Israeli startups because we need to preserve the stability of this industry here. And I think that's had a very calming effect for two reasons. One, for startups that need this influx of capital during this time, but secondly, to project to investors that we're not giving up on this dream of the Israeli high-tech that's become a reality, and we're going to continue, and this is going to be stable going forward. We're going to need this.
So, since we are talking about the October 7 massacre, could you elaborate about the challenges that you, as an industry, you experience since the war started, and how the ecosystem has demonstrated resilience during this period? Because I'm sure the economy is not doing great when a war happens.
Yeah, so obviously this is a challenge, October 7. It's a challenge, I think, on three fronts. One is capital, that investors like stability. And in times of perceived instability, it could be, people are going to freeze decisions on investments. And even if they thought to invest in something, that might take a little bit longer and think it through. And startups might have to pay in equity higher prices for capital than they would have had before October 7th. That's just part of the reality. Second is talent. So talent on two fronts. One is a lot of us, I personally served for a month and a half in the military since October 7th, after October 7th. So many of us were called up in reserves. Many startups lost a lot of their team to reserves and are now starting to get them back as we're downscaling the amount of reserves that have been called up in active duty. But that's something you have to deal with when all of a sudden some of your team, if not all of your team or most of your team, all of a sudden has to go into reserve duty. And there's nobody at any company that I know in Israel that did, or global companies that are invested in Israel, that didn't enable their teams with a very strong backing to go and serve their country and help them understand that this is a priority also, so that they're giving backup for that. And I commend them for that. But that's second. And on the talent front also, I could say is, and this is, I guess, 2B, if 2A was the reserve duty. So 2B is that we were starting to, at AION Labs specifically, but also at other companies, to start to compete and attract global talents to come and work in our companies or form companies in Israel. At AION Labs, we've established 5 companies. 3 of them have non-Israeli founders that have chosen AION Labs in Israel to build their companies in, with Israeli teams that they're managing. And we actively seek to compete for global talents and the best and brightest minds that from anywhere in the world. And we'd love for talented Indian people to come to build companies in Israel and work in our companies in Israel. And we've actually had a few come through our processes from India last year. And there, our philosophy is that as a growing ecosystem in Israel, which is not such a small country anymore, we're already around 10 million people, we should be competing just like any other ecosystem in the world for the best talent from around the world. But when the war started, Ratnadeep, and since you've been here, so you've seen that it's not business as usual here. Since the war started, it's become more challenging to convince people that are not from Israel to come here. because the pictures that you see on the New York Times or CNN or anywhere on global media are not necessarily the day-to-day life here in Israel and Tel Aviv. They're the more sensational pictures that you could see from Gaza, from the war front. Unfortunately, most of those are not positive, so if not all. And so it's going to be increasingly challenging, we understand, in the near future, to be able to bring non-Israeli talented people to Israel and to build companies and work in companies here, but we will continue to try. I think the third element that I can mention that's a challenge is the long-term psychological effect and the mental health, both of the adults and our children that we have to attend to as well, that are going through a war. It's not easy. And we all have to attend a little bit more to our home front and to our personal well-being than we did before October 7th. And that will also continue with us for the near future.
And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and I'm sure you mentioned a little bit about it, and especially when India is one of the largest contributor in terms of immigration to top US IT companies. A lot of Indians have recent graduates, one of the top minds actually, moved to the US, and you see the high skilled migration. I wanted to understand, as the high-tech sector in Israel, your efforts actually to bring this tech talents from India and elsewhere to set up new startups, even during the war. How could Indians contribute in that way?
Yeah. So in general, I see a lot of times the reports coming out from the United States of how many unicorns have been built by Israelis that have moved to the Valley in California or New York, Boston, and we take a lot of pride in that in Israel. But then I think for a second, I pause for a second, and I say, with all these unicorns being built either by Israelis or by Indian nationals, why aren't we in Israel being able to maintain that talent and be able to attract the Indians to come to Israel to build these companies instead of going automatically to the United States? We're much closer home to you. It's a short flight for India if you want to visit your family. I think our cultures are much closer. We have in Israel a deep respect for India. Many of us, I would say more Israelis per capita have been to India than Americans that have actually been to India. So we do have a deep respect for your culture and your talented people and your people in general. So at AION Labs, where we're a venture studio that builds startups at the intersection of cutting-edge AI and computational technologies and biology that address big challenges in the drug discovery and development pipeline and value chain, we actively make sure that all of our opportunities are well known in India, and I would love if you could help share the word, spread the word, so that any talented data scientist, computational biologist, molecular biologist, AI or machine learning expert that thinks that they can solve this challenge and want to be part of building a great biotech startup from ground zero will know about these challenges and know about the opportunity, because we all know, and we operate under this philosophy, that talent is equally distributed throughout the world, but opportunity is not necessarily. So we want to make our opportunities known to as many talented people from around the world. And India is the largest country population-wise, and we would love for many talented Indian people to continue to come to our processes and compete for building companies with us. And that's something we'll continue to do. Obviously, it's a little bit more challenging during a time of war, but I'm thankful also that the Israeli government has put in place regulations that really fast track our capability to bring talented individuals, no matter where they come from around the world, and get automatic visas to work with in our companies. And we've done this before, and we'll continue to do this, to bring them to build companies and work in our companies and contribute to the high-tech society and become a part of the startup nation.
And the last thing that I wanted to ask you before I let you go is
Sure.
India is an amalgamation where you see it's the largest provider of generic medicines globally, and also one of the leading, as I mentioned, one of the leading countries which has uh, a larger share where US gets is IT professionals from. When you have this amalgamation and something that your company is also involved in, focused on AI and computational biology in drug discovery, how important is India a market for you, or
So
be a
India,
talent pool where you want to attract talent from?
yeah, for us, our focus right now is on talent. It's a very important market for us to be able to attract talented people from. I personally have worked in India in previous jobs when I was at Teva Pharmaceuticals, which employs around 4,000 plus people throughout India at factories, R&D sites, and management sites, and have gained a lot of respect for the pharmaceutical industry and capabilities in India. And so for us, India is a source of potential talented people to build companies with from every industry, ranging from data science all the way through life sciences disciplines and the computational disciplines that are out there. And we hope to continue to be attractive for them to come to us because we know that the talent is out there.
Well, that's all the questions that I have, and it's very inspiring for a lot of young people who might be watching this, because when you see the
Thank
US
you.
borders closing up on immigration for a lot of young people who wants to, you have job opportunities in Israel, even amidst a war going on. So I think
Yes.
a lot of young people will be looking up to this for sure.
So we have at AION Labs, anyone that wants to reach out to us and learn about the opportunities to build a company in the tech bio space is welcome to follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, reach out to me and follow me, or join my page on Twitter or LinkedIn and reach out to us. We're very accessible. We have an open challenge right now on our website. If you Google AION Labs, you'll see our website very quickly and be able to see our challenge. Anyone that's interested can reach out to us, and we're happy to make our time accessible to bring talented people from India to Israel to build great companies with us that will help bring cures and health to many around the world.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Ati, and
Thank
speaking
you.
to us.
Thank you.